Hello everyone, this is Mohan Kumar signing in to talk about role of hypothalamus in thermoregulation. Today we learn and understand the basics of our central theme, that is hypothalamus playing as a control center to monitor the body temperature. At the end of the session, you should be thorough about hypothalamus role in regulating the temperature in homeotherms. So these are the contents. I'll be covering hypothalamus in thermoregulation and hot conditions, in hot and humid conditions, and in cold conditions, temperature regulation. The core temperature of a human is regulated and stabilized primarily by the hypothalamus, and more specifically the anterior nucleus and preoptic area. Anterior nucleus and preoptic area. Anterior nucleus is colored in green here, and preoptic area colored in gray color. So anterior nucleus and preoptic area of the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is the blue structure here. Below the hypothalamus is our famous master endocrine gland, that is pituitary gland. So it's labeled here as well. So just above the pituitary gland, we're talking about hypothalamus, and within the hypothalamus there are nuclei. So specifically anterior nucleus and preoptic area, where preoptic nuclei are regions adjacent to this region that plays a role in thermoregulation. So in hot condition, so before that, this core temperature of the body varies from the set point, and endocrine production initiates control mechanisms to increase or decrease energy production or dissipation as needed to return the temperature towards the set point. So the body constantly tries to maintain a temperature of 37.1 plus or minus 0.5 to 1 degree centigrade. A larger deviation is regulated. If unregulated, can be fatal. So how does the body beat the heat or cold? So what happens to us in conditions like in hot conditions? So what happens? The first thing we notice is sweating. Sweating, a maximum of a liter per hour is observed in humans, and in a short duration of time, if I have to speak about, in a 6-hour span, around 10 to 15 liters is, or 650 ml per day is noticed. As skin temperature approaches core temperature, okay, that is, see, as I discussed earlier, homeothermy and poikilothermy. Poikilothermy in the shell region, whereas homeothermy in the core of the body. So the poikilothermic, that is the fluctuations, smaller fluctuations we see in our peripheral regions of the body, is always exposed to the external temperature, external ambient temperature, so it has to be continuously monitored. So as skin temperature, that is the peripheral body temperature, approaches the core temperature, that is the core of the body, transferring heat from the core to the skin becomes increasingly difficult, because two different regions, if they are trying to attain a balance having the same degree centigrade, there is no exchange of heat. One has to be colder to transfer or to absorb the heat from the other region. So as in hot environments, the evaporation of sweat from the skin surface cools this, thereby improving heat transfer from the core. So there are two types of sweat we see. One is apocrine, another one is ecrine. Apocrine sweat is what we see in forehead, back, palms of hand and armpits. This is a sweat which contains protein secretions. Whereas ecrine is a water sweat from all other skin areas. Around the latent heat of water is around 600 calories per gram. Ecrine sweat glands under the skin secrete sweat, and the sweat is a fluid containing mostly water with dissolved ions, which travels up the sweat duct through the sweat pore and onto the surface of the skin. This causes heat loss via evaporative cooling. However, a lot of essential water is lost. Sweating, you lose water. The hair on the skin lie flat. Secondly, the hair on the skin lie flat, preventing heat from being trapped by the layer of still air between the hair. This is caused by tiny muscles under the surface of the skin called arrector pili. So this arrector pili muscles relaxes so that their attached hair follicles are not erect. These flat hairs increase the flow of air next to the skin, increasing heat loss by convection. So when environmental temperature is above core body temperature, sweating is the only physiological way for humans to lose heat. So thirdly, arteriolar vasodilation occurs. So the smooth muscle walls of the arterioles relax, allowing increased blood flow through the artery. This redirects blood into the superficial capillaries in the skin, increasing heat loss by convection and conduction, both methods. So if you look at the diagram, you will have an understanding of what I am saying. In this left side, we have vasoconstriction. On the right side, we have vasodilation. So in our example now, we are talking about vasodilation. And if you compare vasoconstriction to vasodilation, you would have an idea. Here is an artery and a vein. Here is the capillary. Here is the place where the maximum heat is exchanged. It is lost to the outside world. So in a vasodilated condition, if there is no blockage or constrictions in the artery, vasodilation is basically the vessels are dilated or expanded. So when they are expanded, the efficient heat between the arterioles and veins is not so efficient. Instead, the heat flows down to the capillary, exposing the maximum temperature to the outside. So from 35 degrees centigrade, if it's exposed, heat is lost from the body through sweating. In a condition of vasoconstriction, if you look at it, the maximum heat is transferred between arteries and veins. See the arrow mark here, it is quite thicker than the arrow mark we see here. So the maximum heat is lost from arteries to vein instead of to the capillaries. So the heat reaching the capillary is quite low. So that is why in the extremities during the cold condition, your fingers primarily and feet feel colder temperature. They are the ones who will be losing heat faster. So at 31 degrees centigrade, the amount of heat lost is quite low compared to 35 degrees centigrade. So this is what the effect of vasodilation does. And vasoconstriction is usually during cold conditions. We'll talk about this a little later. So vasodilation loses heat. So in hot and humid conditions, in general, humans appear physiologically well adapted to hot and dry conditions. However, effective thermoregulation is reduced in hot and humid environments, such as the coastal areas of Western Ghats and Bay of Bengal, tropical environments, deep mines, where the atmosphere can be water saturated, where moderately hot summer temperatures are accompanied by unusually high vapor pressure. So there is a lot of water in the atmosphere. So that increases the humidity of the area. So increased humidity, the heat exchange is actually hampered. So in hot, humid conditions, clothing can impede efficient evaporation. So it matters a lot what kind of cloth you wear. So in such environment, it helps to wear light clothing such as cotton, that is pervious to sweat but impervious to radiant heat from the sun. That's so the spaces between the threadings of the cotton would allow an efficient sweating to happen, and the threads would actually block the heat rays affecting the body of a person. So it is impervious to radiant heat from the sun. Also, this minimizes the gaining of radiant heat while allowing as much evaporation to occur as the environment will allow. In an opposite side, if you wear a plastic fabric, okay, like right now, we are all struggling with COVID pandemic, and all the frontline care workers or caregivers, like doctors and nurses, are wearing PPE kits. Imagine their situation in the hot and humid conditions. It is unbearable. They cannot wear such a PPE kit for a longer duration of time, because it does not allow body to cool efficiently. So if you look at this picture here, the red boxed, or when the body temperature is increased. So let's see what happens. So increased body temperature and is sensed by temperature sensitive receptors in skin and hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is like a thermostat which senses the temperature changes in the body and try to do the needful. So involuntarily it affects. And so what does it do? It activates the ANS, autonomic nervous system, both parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system of the autonomous nervous system. Both are autonomic. It is not like you would activate it, it is automatically involuntarily regulated. So when parasympathetic nervous system is activated, it brings about sweating, increases heat loss. So one way your body temperature, if it is increased, it would cool down by sweating. In an alternative route, sympathetic nervous system is inhibited. So the inhibition of sympathetic nervous system brings about vasodilation. Vasodilation, as I just spoke about, it increases the heat loss by exposing the maximum amount of heat to the peripheral region, and decreased basal metabolic rate. So it reduces the heat gain. So how does it happen? So basically, metabolic rate is regulated by our thyroid gland. So as we all have seen, during summertime we feel lethargic and we do not feel like doing anything. Instead, just like spending our time lazily or lying on the bed, but doing nothing. You can't even sleep. But it would reduce the metabolic rate. It is automatically, the body gets a signal that the metabolic rate has to be reduced. If the basal metabolic rate increases, there is a lot of ATP is generated. The ATP in turn gets burned to release more of heat, which is unbearable when the body temperature is already risen. So these are involuntary actions. So what happens voluntarily? What all we do? Volatile responses include reduced activity. We don't, as I said, we do not end up doing more of physical work. We try to reduce the work during summer and exposing body to cold environment. We tend to stay in cooler or under the shade regions or of the part of the house, and we tend to wear loose clothing so that efficient evaporation can take place, and drinking something that makes it cool, like for example buttermilk or cold drinks. So all these mechanisms are regulating. When the body temperature is increased, they tend to bring it back to normal body temperature, that's around 37.1 degrees centigrade. So what happens in cold conditions? Heat is lost through the hands and feet, and sweat production obviously decreased. The minute muscles under the surface of the skin called arrector pili muscles, this time they contract, bringing about piloerection, lifting the hair follicle upright. This makes the hair stand on end, which acts as an insulating layer, trapping the heat. This is what also causes goosebumps or gooseflesh, since humans do not have very much hair and the contracted muscles can easily be seen. And vasoconstriction. Arterioles carrying blood to superficial capillaries under the surface of the skin can shrink or constrict, thereby rerouting the blood away from the skin and towards the warmer core of the body. This prevents blood from losing heat to the surroundings and also prevents the core temperature dropping further. This process is what we call as vasoconstriction. It is impossible to prevent all the heat loss from the blood. We can only try to reduce it. In extreme cold conditions, excessive vasoconstrictions lead to numbness and pale skin. You might have noticed, if you are visiting cold countries, the extremities tend to become numb first and you turn to be more paler. So frostbite occurs only when water within the cells begins to freeze. Those places where it is very extreme cold, and if you have a chance of frostbite can only happen if there are cells which are trying to freeze. So water molecules within the cells freeze, bringing the frostbite. Basically it kills the cell. So shivering. Muscles can also receive messages from the thermoregulatory center of the brain, that is the hypothalamus, to cause shivering. This increases heat production as respiration is an exothermic reaction in muscle cells. So shivering is more effective than exercise at producing heat because the animal, including us, remains still as it increases heat production around 300 to 400%, much higher than what body can produce through physical exercise. This means that less heat is lost to the environment through convection. There are two types of shivering. Number one, low intensity shivering. Number two, high intensity shivering. During low intensity shivering, animals shiver constantly at a low level for months during cold conditions. During high intensity shivering, animals shiver violently for a relatively short time. So both processes consume energy. However, high intensity shivering uses glucose as a fuel source and low intensity tends to use fats. This is primarily a reason why animals store up food in the winter, and they constantly undergo low intensity shivering in order to keep their body warm. Brown adipocytes are also capable of producing heat via a process called non-shivering thermogenesis. In this process, triglycerides are burned into heat, thereby increasing body temperature. So these brown adipocytes are present usually in infants where they do not show any shivering. So it is a non-shivering thermogenesis, making the child to regulate the temperature of the body efficiently. So if you look at the picture here, back here in blue color right now, the decreased body temperature. So when the body's temperature decreases, temperature sensitive receptors in skins and hypothalamus again send out a signal to hypothalamus. So they bring about voluntary and involuntary action. Let us see. Voluntarily, we tend to eat more, which is common during winter season. We tend to eat more of fries, oil-based food or nuts, and increased muscle activity and warm clothing and seek heat source. So involuntarily, thermostat in hypothalamus activates warming mechanisms. What are they? Number one, increase thyroid hormone. So that way they increase the basal metabolic rate. So that is generating heat. Number two, sympathetic nervous system is activated, which brings about again increased basal metabolic rate, bringing about vasoconstriction and also piloerection. So all these three mechanisms. So vasoconstriction is reduces the heat loss by constricting the capillaries, blood capillaries, whereas piloerection traps the air layer for insulation by making sure the hair stands straight. The erector pili muscles contract so that the hair stands straight, and the hairs on the body, when they stand upright, they act as an insulating layer by trapping the heat and holding them for longer duration. And in another method, the body shivers, generating heat. There is also another I spoke about, that is the adipose tissue, brown adipose tissue undergoing non-shivering based thermogenesis or heat generation. That is also possible. So this finishes the role of hypothalamus in regulating the temperature when it is too hot or when it is too cold. So what are the mechanisms we see in regulating the temperature of the body? This is it. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Any doubts or clarification, you can leave a comment on the comment box or you can reach me on my number. Thank you.